So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our last free session of the year. And today we're talking about creating a lean culture. My name is Katie Lebetz. I am the president and CEO of Learning to Lean, a lean consulting firm based out of Hortonville, Wisconsin. I am a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt and certified project management professional, an emotional intelligence coach. I'm also an author. I've written three different books. And I've been doing lean and continuous improvement for around 20 years. And I truly am very blessed to be able to do what I love and enjoy every single day. So, we're going to jump right in this morning to talk about what is a company culture first. And then we're going to talk about what is a lean culture and what we would look for as evidence in a company to be able to say that you're growing or have a lean culture. And then we're going to finally finish up the session today talking about lean leadership. So let's talk about what is a company culture. So when we talk about a company culture, you may hear things like it's the DNA for a culture or it's values. It's our values. Uh, your company culture can also be your attitudes. So the attitudes of your employees, the attitudes of your leadership team. Your company culture can also be goals. And goals and objectives, as we know, some companies have standard goals and objectives that they have for their organization as overarching. And sometimes we have goals and objectives that are specific to a year. Some people call company culture their personality. So, this is our personality. This is who we are as a collective person. And also, our company culture is accepted behavior. So, it's the behavior in which we either consciously or unconsciously accept within our organization the behavior of how we interact with each other, and how we act with our customers. So that's company culture. But to summarize a company culture, it's a set of shared beliefs, values, and practices. That's really what it is. And that's how we describe a company culture. So I'd like to show you some different examples of company cultures that I thought were pretty neat to be able to look at and very different maybe from what you've experienced. All of these available are online, so let's take a look at these. The first one we're going to look at is Zappos. So if you don't know what Zappos is a company that sells shoes online. They have a wide variety of inventory. So that's one of their cool parts is that if you're looking for something very specific, you'll probably find it with them. And Zappos has their culture here, their core values. That's how they describe their culture. It's famously built on employee happiness and delivering wow through service, supported with those 10 core values that include creating fun and weirdness. Isn't that cool? They promote weirdness, pursuing growth, and building open and honest relationships. So I think that's so cool that they have these values that it says create fun and a little weirdness, right? They have do more with less, be passionate and determined. So those are their core values that everyone knows within their organization. Let's look at another example of a company's values and company culture. Let's look at Patagonia. So Patagonia is, many of us already inherently understand Patagonia's company culture. It's their words, purpose-driven through what they call quote unquote clan culture, famously unconventional, built around a core mission of environmental activism, which we pretty much already know, and a deep commitment to employee well-being. The unique approach is guided by a specific set of core values, and they summarize it with an internal philosophy of let my people go surfing. So I think that's pretty cool. I would replace surfing with riding, but that's just me. So that's their company culture, right? We knew about employee activism. But that's a cool culture that they have. For some people, that would be really intriguing to be able to want to work there for that. And for some people, it may not. Let's look at the last one, which is HubSpot. So if you Google HubSpot core values, you will see that they have publicly released their core values for several years. Their last version of their core values was published in September of this year. So these are the ones: solve for the customer, be bold and learn fast. Some other companies call that fail fast or fail faster. Align, adapt, and grow, and deliver with the heart. So you can find that entire presentation online on their website. And they also call it the Employee Manifesto. So Employee Manifesto sometimes can generate some different feelings in regards to those words, but that's their culture, right? And so that's what they deem acceptable. So my question to you is, looking at Zappos and hearing their core culture, their core values in Patagonia and HubSpot, why, if that's truly their cultures, why wouldn't you want to work for them? Right? Why wouldn't you want to work for them? I think most of us, of those just three that I showed you, would say, yes, I want to work in a place like that, right? That sounds fantastic. That sounds intriguing. And again, it needs to be truly what the company's core values and the culture really is, not just words on their website, right? And we know that sometimes within organizations, some things can be said that these are our core values, but then when you actually start working there, it may be a little bit different, right? There may be another side to it. So I just wanted to share with you a personal example that I had. Um, when I worked for an organization, their core values, one of which was work hard, play hard. So nothing necessarily wrong with that. But it all depends on how that manifests in this particular company. The play hard portion of it usually manifested us getting kicked out of places for Christmas parties because people were literally hanging from the rafters and swinging off of lights in a ballroom. So that doesn't always work well. Within this organization, if you have attended any of my trainings, you've heard me say this. Their quality policy listed on the wall was, we will meet the demands of our customers or die trying, right? So that is, regardless of whether or not they would say that that's their core value, that's posted in every conference room. So my question to you is, do you want to work for an organization that says we'll meet the demands of our customers or die trying? We really need to be careful in regards to what messages we're sending and really what is the culture there. So the culture in that particular organization was chaos. And it was very, very stressful. That organization I worked at, they laid off every year for 13 years while I was there. So you were constantly worried about being able to meet the demands of the customer and not lose your job. So that was definitely a different company culture. So why is culture so important? It is used to attract and retain talent, right? So you may be attracted because of what they're saying, and it sounds like a great place to work. And we do innovation, or we support. Many companies now will say, we want you to volunteer in the community, and we'll give you 40 hours to do that. And some people are very excited about that. But some people will also view that as not part of the culture, but maybe part of the benefits. Company culture is important because it boosts engagement, of course, drives performance, and sets the personality of the business, right? So that's why company culture is important. So you can attract people based on your culture or your perceived culture. And obviously, if it is a culture in which it is truly exciting for people, people are going to obviously want to work harder. So that's performance and engagement. And that's the personality of the business. So that's what company culture is all about. But also, I want you to say, just like there's an overall culture of people living in the US, right? Just like you have the overall culture of the company that you're working for, there's also subsets of cultures. Just like we would say that there's different cultures in each state that varies by location. In companies, you can have different cultures varied by department or physical location around the world. And just like in the United States, we all live in different places, and we can have various different cultures based on our food we love, or the pace we operate, or the values that we hold dear to our hearts. So, company culture, you can have it as a whole, but also be very much aware that there are subsets to that culture. And one of the subsets, obviously, that we're going to be talking about today is lean. And what kind of lean or continuous improvement culture do you have, or are you missing within your organization? So, how do we define a lean culture? So, when we think of a lean culture, we are specifically talking about behaviors, systems, and leadership. So we're going to talk about each one of those. Behaviors, systems, and leadership is what we're talking about from a lean culture perspective. So how do we build a lean culture? We build a lean culture through actions, language, and leadership behaviors. And I was just talking, just before this meeting, I was having a meeting with a group of black belts, recently certified black belts, and we were specifically talking about these three, probably more about actions and language at this point in our particular conversation for today. And I was explaining to them that, when you are working on a project, or you're showing people some different options, or you're doing some different training, we want to be able to use the words that we've talked about in class, right? We want to be able to use the words like, this is an example of visual management. Right? They were talking about doing a floor layout and noting where there have been quote unquote accidents or near misses on the floor. And I said that that's a great example of visual management. So when you present that to the team, not just say this is a great way to be able to determine where we have opportunities for improvement from a safety perspective, but this is an example of visual management. We want to use the language that we've talked about in our sessions, we've talked about in class, or they've learned about in any of their lean experiences. So, what does a lean culture look like? So, from a visual perspective, so the things that we can see, we're looking at, like I just mentioned, visual management. We're looking at standard work. And as if you've been in any of my classes, you know that I talk about standard work needs to look like the standard work that works for your organization. So, for some organizations, that's a document. For other organizations, that could be a video, right? For other organizations, that could be pictures, right? Toyota's famous for having all of their standard work to be pictures and no actual language on there. So it has to be standard work that works for your organization. Daily huddles or daily stand-ups. Some people do tier boards or loop boards, but I cannot express enough how important a daily huddle or a daily stand-up. My husband has been in the hospital quite often this year, unfortunately, and I know for a fact that the hospital system in our area, they do daily huddles and they call them their huddles. So daily huddles or daily stand-ups, just a quick check-in to see where we are for the day, and then a clean, organized, and stable process. So making sure that we have a repeatable process with predictable results. Now, these are the visual things. Now, the invisible things, so would be leadership behaviors, though they're not always invisible, right? Psychological safety. As I mentioned, I'm working for an organization that laid off every year for 13 years. That wasn't a lot of psychological safety. We want to have a problem-solving mindset. And I would challenge that to be able to say not just problem solving, but also problem preventing mindset and alignment to your true north. And if you don't know what true north is, it is your guiding principles, right? So how is our behavior, our actions, and our verbiage or what we say in aligned with your true north? So your goals, your morals, your principles, and your values. So, what are the building blocks to a lean culture? So, maybe you are starting off in your lean journey, or maybe you are well into your journey. So, what do you need to either build or strengthen your lean culture within your organization? And I like this breakdown of three different areas. The first area is respect for people, then CI mindset, and then systems and structure. So respect for people with trust, transparency, and empowerment, right? So if you send people to training or if you have them attend a Kaizen event and you don't be able, or you're not providing trust, transparency, and empowerment, they are not going to be successful. Right. We want to empower people to be able to utilize the tools and concepts to be able to truly solve the problem. Right. We want to trust that they're going to come up with the best solution possible and not micromanage them. And transparency. As I always talk with my customers, if I'm coming in to do an event, I will ask them, is there anything that's off the table? I need to know that right away. And for some organizations, I will tell you 99.9% of the time, my customers will say, no, there's nothing off the table. Every once in a while, we'll get somebody that says, you know what, we can't replace our ERP system right now. And I know everybody hates it, but that's just not on the table right now. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. But that's transparency. CI mindset, daily problem solving, right? So, how are we solving problems, which I'll talk about here in a few minutes too? What methodology are you using? How are you empowering people and not making people feel like it's a punishment to do problem solving? And micro improvements versus mega projects. So, micro improvements are those small incremental changes that you make in your organization that lead to a major shift. Mega projects in general don't lead to those major shifts. And I've worked with many customers over many years, and the number one reason why people fail in their lean journeys is they choose these gargantuan projects. And if you've heard me talk, you've heard me say they pick boil the ocean or solve world hunger projects, right? They have picked projects that are just monumentous to start with. They're okay to pick big projects, which once you're on your way, but to be your first lean project to solve all the problems from the moment you get the customer order to the moment you ship it out the door would be considered a mega project. That's too big. We need to break down that value stream into small micro improvements. And then systems and structures. Again, going back to daily huddles or stand-ups, problem solving pathways, meaning pick whatever methodology you want to choose for problem solving. There are a lot out there, right? So I have some customers doing PDCA. I have some doing 5 Whys and fishbone diagram. Some people do A3. Some people do 8D. Whatever works for your organization. I will say the only caveat to that is that 8D is a very heavy problem solving process. It stands for 8 disciplines. It originated in the automotive industry, and I think it is a very um, challenging problem solving process to follow, right? If you're starting out on your lean journey, it's something that you could consider later on, but to be able to say from day one, that's probably a little bit too heavy to work with. And then coaching routines. And I just spoke about this with another group. Not everybody that has any sort of lean training, whatever you call it, is going to be a good coach, right? So some companies I work with, they have great programs and they have great certification, they have great training, and part of their requirements to be able to get certified is to be coaching others and realize too that not everybody's a good coach. And some people just are not extroverted, right? They have a hard time communicating or working one-on-one with somebody else. So let's just make sure that we recognize that too as an opportunity for some folks, and whatever coaching routine means to them. So, what does a lean culture look like? So, tactically and functionally, what does a lean culture look like? And again, this is based on my experience of being able to roll out lean within and with outside of manufacturing. So, our customers are anywhere from manufacturing to healthcare to IT to insurance to agriculture to everything in between, right? So this is not industry specific. So what I created when I was doing our black belt training was what I call a culture pit stop. So if you sign up to take any training, and specifically the Lean Six Sigma Black Belt training, I talk about this culture pit stop. And this is my gut check to you to be able to say, do you have this within your organization? If not, if I were to come in to do a lean assessment and a lean culture assessment, this is what I would be looking for. So your team members should know that lean focuses on the elimination of waste in a process. And they should know what the eight wastes are. We typically use downtime as the acronym. They should know what the eight wastes are. Ideally, they should be able to walk by and recognize them. They should know that Six Sigma focuses on the reduction of variation. And variation is something that doing something over and over again with different results and why that's bad. So we don't want variation. We want a repeatable process with predictable results. If you're a lean or CI leader in your organization, you should know your yield numbers, first pass yield, rolled throughput yield, or your level of Sigma. You should know how your processes are working. If you don't know what they all are, just start in one focus area. The next cultural pit stop is your team members should know how to practice and sustain 5 or 6S, depending on your particular company and your approach in every area of your organization. So that means physically and digitally. So 5S or 6S is not just about manufacturing. Most companies start with manufacturing because it's easy for us to walk by and go, oh, look, that's different, right? But we can absolutely do this from a digital perspective. And probably the most commentary I get from a digital perspective is take a look at your share drive or take a look at SharePoint. Two opportunities in general for companies to do 5S. Your team members should also know your organizational goals for the year. Do you have organizational goals for the year? Keep it simple, right? 1 to 5 meaningful goals for the year. If you haven't started on them now or finished them by now, most companies start August, September timeframe to do them. You should be going at it right now, not going into next year and announcing your organizational goals in April or May. Your team members should know what good looks like, right? So, what does good look like for each goal and how they can personally impact the goal from a positive or a negative standpoint? And I really suggest embracing an approach. Hosh and Connery, if that works for you, X Matrix, strategy deployment, EOS, traction, big rocks, BHAG, 4D, there's a million of them out there, right? You have to know what works best for your organization. But ideally, your folks should be able to say what those goals are for the year. So they have to be meaningful and they have to be measurable. And they also have to be impactful. And we need to know as people in the organization how we can negatively or positively impact those goals. If you're a leaner CI leader from a cultural perspective, you should know your external customers by name. Not Sally works at John Deere, just the fact that John Deere is your customer or Costco is your customer. You should know what product or service you provide for those customers and what's important to them that's critical to quality. Right. So you should know who your customers are. And some of you on the session today may be thinking, well, of course we know who our customers are. Maybe you do, but have you asked any of your team members? In an organization that I worked in, I was presenting to my IT group, so around 300 people, and I was presenting about our customers. And I made the inaccurate assumption that the folks that was working with at the time knew who our customers were. And I quickly found out they had no idea whatsoever of who our customers were. So every time I had an opportunity to get in front of that group, I presented about another customer and what we make for them, because that makes our jobs more real, right? Instead of just doing things and saying, oh, I'm just going to help with this process or I'm going to automate this from an IT perspective, we are making this real. One of the customers that I work with, they do some medical work. Some of you may be on there from this customer. And, it's having and hearing from some of the patients that may be using in the device and how that device has saved their lives makes a huge impact to your culture, your employees, and your organization. Your team members should know your internal and external customers, like I just mentioned, but also internal, recognizing that we have internal and external customers and that the customer defines value. We talk about three different types of value. And why do they need to know that? Well, they need to know that because we need to be focused on adding more value to our customers. So we define value as value add, business non-value add, and non-value added activities. And you need to know that each step in the process is defined by one of those three things. So also whether or not their daily activities add value or not, and then focus on reducing or eliminating non-value added steps. So that's very important too. Your team members should know the KPIs for the organization. Now, again, this is a bar that I've set very high. This is if I'm coming in to do a lean assessment and talk about your lean culture, this is what I would be looking for from a bar set very high. To know that your team members know the KPIs for your organization and their status, or at least know where to look at the status and how they personally can negatively or positively impact the KPIs. And then KPIs for each lean activity, right? So, how does the blitz affect your particular KPI? Maybe that blitz has affected your safety metrics in a positive way. And how a Kaizen or a DMAIC or DMADV project affects your KPIs. Your team members should know the difference between hard and soft savings, right? And you as a leader should know what a fully burdened rate means. So hard savings means that this particular activity has impacted our bottom line. And it's actually something that comes out of the P&L. Soft savings means it's intrinsic savings that we have allowed somebody to go on to do more value added work. A fully burdened rate means if we were to calculate savings per hour, it is the average salary plus overhead, insurance, et cetera. Your finance department knows this number. And there's also no way we could possibly back into somebody's salary with that number. We use that for our savings calculation. And then the negative and positive financial impacts of your lean activities. So sometimes when we do lean activities, we have to have a capital expenditure, a capital investment, and that people understand what the return on investment is for that. Again, that's a higher bar to be setting. Also, that, and we talk about this in class too, every meeting should have an agenda. So even if it's your daily huddle or your daily stand up, there should be 3 or 4 things that you are covering in that daily huddle. This is one that touches on the project management portion of my brain. If there's action items, there must be names associated with those action items and completion or update dates associated with each task. And published meeting notes. There are many AI tools that you can use now that most companies are embracing to be able to take notes. Even on Zoom, Zoom can enable AI to take notes for you. And no update is not an acceptable update at your next meeting. So many times that we have meetings and we know that people are going to come in and say no update. And again, when it refers back to that definition of culture, and is that an acceptable behavior within your organization to say no update? Is that the type of culture you want? Your team members should know your critical to quality requirements for the product or service, meaning will the customer accept this and how do we know and how can we find that information? Is this acceptable for the customer? That, there may be a slight paint defect. Sometimes our customer is okay with it if it's on the underside of something that people can't see. Or sometimes we have customers that say, absolutely not, we can't do that. Sometimes our customer will say, hey, we need that report first thing in the morning. Is it okay if it gets there between 7:30 and 8 o'clock? Customer may say yes, or the customer may say, no, I need it in my inbox by 7 a.m. But we have to know that. And we only know that by asking questions. Every mid-scale or large-scale project should have a project charter, and you need to create a system for tracking or monitoring your projects. One centralized location. How are we tracking our CI projects from a Blitz to a DMAIC to a DMADV? How are we tracking non-CI projects? You can use Excel. I'm not a huge fan of Excel anymore. I feel like the world runs on Excel. There's other tools out there, right? You could use SharePoint. You can use Monday.com. You can use Airtable. There's so many other tools that will help you to be able to visualize this data too. And you should be able, as a lean leader, to calculate your process flow metrics. So this should be part of your daily stand-up or chair meetings and know what good looks like, right? And what do those metrics mean? And even more importantly, how are they calculated if you really want to raise the bar? Next, we'll talk about going to the Gemba and have that be part of your life. There was an organization that I worked for that they had a very difficult time with getting this particular organization, the engineers, to go out to the manufacturing floor. Anytime that there are questions in regards to how do we put this product together, or process questions or quality questions, they would submit a ticket or send a note and it would just be communicated electronically. And it was very frustrating, right? And so they instituted that every engineer must have a seat on the floor. So all the engineers sat on the manufacturing floor. And it's really important to have that culture of going to the Gemba, whether it's physically or virtually, depends on the world that you live in right now. And we want to make sure that we coach to prevent criticism and process of the process and future ideas. In class, we talk about the fact of please don't just say no, say let's try, right? And give us an opportunity to try it and see whether or not it works. As a lean or CI leader, you should know your scrap and rework numbers, right? You should be measuring scrap and rework. Your team members should know how they impact that. And you want a culture of quality at the source, which means we're not passing bad product or information on down the line or to the next process to have them figure it out. It's like, oh, look, that's bad. Okay, well, Sam will figure that out. And it's like, no, stop the process and work to figure it out, right? You should be measuring rework and scrap. You should be measuring rework and scrap. Okay, from a manufacturing standpoint, that may be apparent. Why do you need to know that? Because that's the cost of poor quality. That's the cost that is impacting your profit margins, right? We need to know how much it really costs us to make that product, especially if we're doing rework or rehab scrap. What does that look like from a healthcare perspective? Well, we don't want to really talk about rework and scrap, right, from a healthcare perspective. But from a healthcare perspective, where we're looking at rework, you can say, what percentage of the time are the operating rooms set up correctly? Right, that they follow a standard process, and let's say that somebody's going to have a baby, right, and that the doctor notes that they have all of the equipment or all the tools necessary given an average birth, an average delivery, right? Or did the nurse have to go and get something else that they needed? Or was that room set up correctly? Or did they have to call for medicine that should have been there already, or an IV bag, et cetera? So there's different ways to be able to measure that depending on the industries that you're in. And you should be assessing product and project opportunities for risk. So some companies are risk averse and some companies are risk accepting, and then most companies are somewhere in the middle. So start using the terminology risk. Risk is not something that is a negative connotation, right? Risk is being able to say what bad things could happen and how can we prevent them from happening. From a lean and CI perspective, how can we improve the process to reduce our risk in this area? And some of you that are on the call today, you have to do FEMAs, so failure modes effects analysis. So risk is part of your everyday language and wording. And for others of you, you have no idea what I just said, and that's okay, right? But it's being able to talk about risk and to be able to understand that that's part of life every day and what risk is associated with how our process is operating, right? how our product was created or our service was created too, because this has to do with service too. And your team should know the 8 wastes by heart, right? You should be able to provide multiple examples of the waste. So if you create a culture and process around it, and you want to start waste walks, which is fine, just make sure that you have action plans to remove the waste before the next scheduled walk. No process, no walk. So we don't want that to be a crab sheet. So some of you have been in class with me and you've heard me talk about a waste walk as a crab sheet. We don't want people walking around and going, oh, there's waste there, and they're just being crabby about it. Maybe another word that I won't say online. So we don't want that to be the case. We want that to be a case to say, wow, there's an opportunity for greatness. There's an opportunity for us to eliminate waste. Let's work together, action items, owners, and due dates, and get this done before we have another waste walk, right? Otherwise, you just end up with a pile of actions that nobody's doing. And finally, you got to stop the cycle. So stop the cycle of solving the problems the same old way. So your team members will continue to go to the habit part of the brain until you help them to do things differently. So I don't care what you pick. Pick some sort of problem solving. I don't care. PDCA, 5 Whys, affinity, fishbone, A3, 8D, doesn't matter. Pick something that you can do. Pick something that is sustainable. Pick something that is culturally appropriate for your organization. And really practice PDCA, which means 50% of your time should be spent in understanding the problem you're trying to solve and gathering your data. So every company has a different approach. Don't make this to be a punishment, right? We want to make this as part of our DNA, as part of our daily practice that we have a problem, stop. We are not going to play problem solving paintball. Okay. We're not going to just shoot at things that move. We are going to take a methodical approach to this. And whether you open a website or grab a piece of paper or go get some post-it notes, let's first of all understand the problem we're trying to solve, and then let's brainstorm on the solutions. And it doesn't matter what you pick, just pick something that people can understand and do consistently. The other part that I want to include in here is making sure that you understand who your competition is. And I did a post on that yesterday. Not always just knowing your internal and external customers, but also know from a cultural standpoint, from a company standpoint, who is your competition? Of all the training classes that I've done for the last year, I believe that there was one class that actually knew that there were people in the audience that knew who their competition was from a company perspective. All the other ones I had to Google for them. You should know who your competitors are. You have to know who you're up against. You have to know, what does your competition do better than you? Is their culture different than yours? Are their goals and values different than yours? If so, how are they different and why? What do you do better than them? What do they do better than you? These are all things that we should know from a cultural perspective. So we talked about what is company culture. I gave you some examples of lean culture and where a bar should be set for that. Now we need to talk about lean leadership. So without lean leadership, your lean culture is not going to thrive. So I wrote an article for ASQ last month, and in the article I said lean without leadership support is like trying to ride your bike with your kickstand down. So whether you ride a motorcycle like I do, or you ride a bicycle, you know that we're not going to get very far with your kickstand down. So I want to share with you some examples of that. If you're trying to ride your bike with your kickstand down and don't have leadership support of your lean culture, what does that look like? That looks like one person carrying the torch alone, right? They're wandering around and they're speaking the good word about lean and continuous improvement, but they have zero support. That's what it looks like when you don't have leadership support for lean. What else does it look like? People get sent to belt training and come back to nothing. Nothing. They come back to nothing. That means that There are no actions that are required after their training. They are not held accountable. They are not given an opportunity to apply what they've learned, nor are they measured on that ability to apply what they've learned. It also looks like broken processes remain broken because that's the way we've always done it. Firefighting is rewarded and prevention is extra, right? And we've all been at places where you're like, "Way, good job. You guys are fantastic." And you know that they didn't have a methodology whatsoever. And they just, by some stroke of luck, were able to prevent it from happening right now, but maybe not again in the future. So, what does lean look like without lean leadership? The organization says the right words, they know the language, they know the slogans, but they don't give teams time to actually improve, to do 5S. 5S and 8 waste become posters on the wall and not practices. I was in an organization one time when I walked into the organization, I went on a manufacturing floor and it was a pigsty. Any of you on this call would have agreed with me. You would have been like, this is horrible. There are signs everywhere that say we do 5S. And this particular facility was unacceptably disorganized and unclean. And I went up to a lady on the line and I said, "Do you do 5S?" And she said, "Yes." And she grabbed her Windex bottle and she said, "I clean my workstation every day at 3 o'clock." That's not 5S. That's just a poster on the wall. Turnover creeps up because frontline employees don't see leadership removing barriers or investing in managing and making the work easier, safer, and more consistent. So, for internal and external customers. So, if you have lean without lean leadership, you're going to potentially get increased turnover because people don't believe you. And CI roles are unclear or unresourced or bounced around the organization. Definitely worked with companies like that where CI reports to ops, then CI reports to quality, then CI reports to IT, and then CI reports to finance. And they can't figure out where CI actually reports. So those are examples of kickstands. So when it's down, your teams push harder and feel stuck, and momentum never builds. So that's a pretty harsh reality of what lean looks like without leadership support. So the best lean leaders provide time for improvement. And I get it. That's really hard to do. You may be in an environment right now where you're like, "Katie, we are just working all the overtime that we possibly can, and we're trying really hard to do everything." And but just imagine if you were better and more efficient at your processes, you wouldn't be running around with your hair on fire all the time. Ask better questions. Lean leaders ask better questions, right? They have those conversations. They understand the terminology. They ask why. They model the behavior. It's not like you guys go to class and I will sit in my office and not talk about this. No, they model the behaviors. They use the language, they use the tools. They find a problem and they follow the process too. They value more than hard savings. So again, it's hopefully you don't have a culture that is just specifically focused on money, money, money and savings, savings, savings from CI, because I will tell you that your low hanging fruit is going to disappear very quickly. And then life is going to become much more challenging and much more hard to find those easy projects and those quick wins. But that's part of the maturity and roadmap. Savings, if you said tomorrow, I want to start a lean culture, we want to deploy lean, we want to embrace, Katie, everything that you've said, can you give me a roadmap for this? And when, I know you said savings isn't right now, when would we look at savings? I would say, depending on your cadence, depending on how fast you can go in your organization, you're probably not looking at savings until year 2 or 3. Right? So year 2 or 3, where I would say, okay, maybe we're at that point now where we can start to track those. Protect the work, right? So protect the work. Make sure that you aren't bouncing people from one thing to another. Yes, I gave you time to do that Kaizen. Yes, I gave you time to be able to make those improvements. But you know what? We have a really hot customer order and you need to go work on this right now. That's what protect the work means. Nope, you promised and allowed us time to work on this. So let's get it over the line. and align incentives, right? So to make sure that we are incentivizing people for the right things, whatever incentivizing is. And that is a cultural aspect too. Many of the companies that I work with, I always ask all of my companies, what do you do to celebrate, right? What do you do to celebrate small wins or large wins or successful kaizens or whatever? You need to have something. And some companies are still trying to figure that out. That's fine. But if you don't figure it out quickly, that's going to become part of your culture where I hear people say, we don't do anything. We're just on the gerbil wheel and we're on to the next project. They're going to get burnt out and they're going to leave. That's the reality. And make improvements visible, right? So we want to be able to make sure that our improvements are visible, which means sometimes we have improvements in finance and nobody can walk by the finance department and see it, which means you have to be able to communicate that information so people understand that you've made changes in that particular area, even though we can't walk by and see it. So how are you going to communicate that? So start today to change your lean culture. Set a clear and target condition and require measurable problem statements. And if you didn't take my session on that, you can look it up on YouTube or contact me. I have a whole session on measurable problem statements and how to write those. I actually have an article coming out for ASQ on creating a measurable problem statement in January. Connect training to action. So again, if you're sending people to any sort of training, it doesn't even matter if you're talking about lean training, making sure that there's actions associated with that. If you're sending people to safety training, right, we want to make sure that there's some actions associated with that, meaning practicing what they taught or what they were taught in class, making sure that the number of safety incidences has gone down or we're aware of a safety incident. Blocking time for 5S and basic stability. I was working with an organization that said that they needed help with 5S. And again, 5S is a great place to start if that's the problem that you need to solve. If you need to get more organized, if you need to have visual management, if you need to have Pokeyoke, then great. But this company was very frustrated and they said, we tried to roll out 5S, it didn't work. I said, okay, tell me about it. And they said, we told everybody 15 minutes before end of shift, you must 5S. And they said 15 minutes before end of shift, everybody stands at the time clock. And I said, but you just told them to 5S. What does that mean? And they said, it means 5S. I know, but you have to be specific. You need to make a list of put the tools back where they're supposed to go in their designated areas, sweep the area, wipe down the, X, Y, or Z. You need to have 3 to 5 things of 5S related activities that these folks need to do, and then come to a designated location to stand up for the end of day huddle and move on from there. And that was just one little part that they missed, right? You can't just tell people to 5S, you have to be specific about it. And then, of course, conduct daily stand-ups. You've heard me say that multiple times. I was in charge of a project management group for Plexus in IT. And one of the revolutionary changes that we did, or 2 changes we did, we created a Kanban board physically and then virtually, and we did daily stand-ups. And those daily stand-ups were revolutionary for our team. It just allowed us to make sure that we understood where the status of every project was, what the challenges and successes were, and where they needed help. 15 minutes every morning, 7:45, best thing ever. And make sure you tell the story, right? Tell your story about lean, tell your story about the wins, and tell your story about the challenges that you faced along the way. It's okay, we all have challenges. So just remember, and I saw this online and I thought this was fantastic. Your company culture is not the words on your website or posters on the wall. It's how your people feel on Sunday night. And we've all had the Sunday night scaries, that's for sure. I just want to make sure you're aware of some upcoming events that we have. So if you are not aware, I work with NWTC also, our technical college out of Green Bay. We have Lean Six Sigma Green Belt training in January. We have black belt training. So to become a green belt, you do not need to have any other belts beforehand. So you can walk in fresh off the street. So those classes are available in January. Black belt, you must have completed a green belt certification prior to attending black belt, and you need to have a project in mind. So that those classes will be in March. And I partnered with NWTC to create the Lean Alliance. And the Lean Alliance is a collective group of people and companies that are passionate about lean and continuous improvement. And they can be anywhere on the journey. So you may be just starting, or you may be rocking and rolling, and that's great. We come together as a group multiple times during the year. So there's our schedule. And we have different speakers, and we also have plant tours. So here in the Northeast Wisconsin area. So in January, we have Packer Fastener coming in to talk about their strategy deployment, or Hoshin Conry. In March, we have somebody coming in to talk to us about BI, so business intelligence and lean and continuous improvement. In April, we're going to Sturgeon Bay to visit Cadence. We have some of our Cadence folks on today. So thank you so much, James at Cadence, for allowing us to come visit you. In June, we have one of our teachers at NWTC coming in, Andy. He's going to be talking about lean tools. In July, we are going to take a tour of Levada. And in November, I'll be talking about lean culture. And you also receive a discount on our annual lean conference, which is at the end of September this year. And we will also be having a project competition this year. For the Lean Alliance, it's $975 per company. And if you join, then you are allowed to send up to 5 people to each of those events. They don't have to be the same 5 people, but 5 of your team members can come to each of those events. If you want any more information in regards to this, if you are not an NWTC customer right now, you get a special discounted rate through me for the green belt training or the black belt training. We'd love to see you at the Lean Alliance. So thank you so much for your time today. I'd love to connect with you if I haven't already. And I will continue to offer these free sessions next year. I am looking for your input in regards to what you would like to see in one of my free sessions. So if you put that on chat or send me a note, that would be fantastic. I'm opening it up for questions now, and thank you so much for your time today. And I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.